Okay, let's dig into these new DNC debate requirements. The Democratic Party has put in place some new and stricter requirements to make the third and fourth officially DNC sanctioned primary debates, which are scheduled to take place in, we'll put it up on the screen in a second, but I believe it's September and October is when debates 3 and 4 will take place. And there's a lot to talk about here. And I want to sort of do this justice and really go through it piece by piece and think it through, because a lot of the reactions I've seen online to these requirements are not making a lot of sense. So first, let's zoom out a little bit. Why do we have requirements? Why do we have minimum standards that need to be met to participate in debates? Well, if you have no standards at all, you can end up with dozens, 50. I mean, you've got to have some, does anyone who announces a candidacy get to participate in DNC sanctioned debates? Does anybody who's on the ballot in even one state get to participate? It's chaos if you have no minimum requirements whatsoever. But on the other side of this, we know, 2016 being a prime example, that the DNC has ways of influencing the Democratic primary that can be anti-progressive, anti-insurgent candidate, and basically pro-status quo, pro-establishment candidate. And so what we don't want to have are requirements that are so strict that they preempt the possibility of having serious insurgent progressive candidates and challengers for the 2020 Democratic primary. So the first debates are in late June and late July. We're very close. I mean, we're a month from the first debate. And the requirements for those first two debates, which are going to be split into A and B because the field is still so large, the requirement for those first two debates, which will be debate 1A and 1B and debate 2A and 2B. We've known about these for a while. 65,000 individual donors, and you need to be polling 1% in 3 qualified polls closer to the date of the debate. So the poll, we'll look at the polls now to figure out who would be in as of today. But what's going to matter is how the candidates are doing closer to the debates in mid to late June. So we'll put up on the screen for you also the requirements for the following debates. So first two debates, 65K donors and 1% in 3 qualified polls. The DNC has now added stricter requirements for debates 3 and 4. And in debates 3 and 4, the requirements double the donor number to 130,000 donors. And they also double the polling requirement to 2% instead of 1%. And that needs to be in 4 rather than just 3 polls. So the criticisms immediately from some people have been, this is going to destroy the field. This is unfair to smaller candidates. This is a pro-establishment DNC move. This is potentially going to alienate donors to those lower ranked candidates because they will say, well, why am I even going to bother if these new even higher requirements are going to keep them out of the third and fourth debate? Anyway, we want the field to stay bigger for a longer period of time. I think we have to break this down into 2 parts, the donor requirement and the polling requirement, okay? Let's first talk about the 2% polling requirement. The DNC, the convention it's in the summer. I don't know if it's scheduled for June, July, or August, but it's in summer of 2020. If you don't have 2% by the third debate in September, I believe it is completely reasonable to say you can't continue being in the officially sanctioned DNC debates. If you can't get to 2% after 2 national debates and 6 or 7 months of campaigning for most of these candidates, you don't have a shot and you are becoming a distraction, period. And you're taking time away from the candidates who are in this thing, having time to better flesh out and talk about their ideas. I have no problem whatsoever with a 2% polling requirement for the third and fourth debates. The question mark for me is 130,000 donors. Okay. Bill Scher pointed out on Twitter that back in 2008, John Edwards had like 20,000 donors or something like that at a relatively advanced point in the campaign. He was a serious candidate in terms of the polling, but he did not have 130,000 donors. So I think that it's really important to point out that if we want to make a case that these requirements are too strict, it's got to be along the number of donors line. I don't think there is any serious case to be made that 2% by September is too high of a threshold. Now, let's understand a little bit about what the effect would be of the 1% and 2% polling requirements based on today's numbers, okay? To be in the first debates, you need to poll 1%. If we look at the current average polling, remember, what matters is how they poll right before the debates, not right now. But let's imagine that we had today's polling as the sort of way to decide who gets into the debates. You have Bennett, Bullock, Hickenlooper, Seth Moulton, Bill de Blasio, Delaney, Kirsten Gillibrand, Marianne Williamson, Tim Ryan, and Tulsi Gabbard. That's 10 candidates. None of them are polling 1% right now, okay? There are, or rather, I'm sorry, there are 10 candidates who are polling 1% right now, and that's still a very solid number for the first and second debate. There's a broad range of opinion represented among those 10 candidates. So there would be a bunch of people who would be out today if the requirement were 1%, but we would still have 10 people participating. Very reasonable for this early in the game. If the 2% requirement were put in place today, you would still have Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke, and Cory Booker. That's 7 candidates, okay? If we have 7 candidates by the third debate, it is very reasonable. And again, if you participate in 2 national debates and you can't get 2%, I don't believe you deserve to keep taking up space on the stage. You don't have a shot. So the only debate for me is about the individual donor number. I get that donations are a way to prove your viability, but 130,000 donors at 14 months before the election, which is effectively what September will be, that might be too high, okay? Can somebody polling 1.8% in October end up being the nominee by June? I don't think they can. Can someone with only 100,000 donors in October end up being the nominee in June? I think they can. I mean, it may be a long shot compared to some of the other candidates, but that's where the focus should be on getting these requirements changed. 1% to be in debates 1 and 2, 2% to be in debates 3 and 4, completely reasonable. And I have not seen any serious argument that is too high of a requirement. If you think I'm wrong, let me know. We will have a poll on the David Pakman Show Instagram page about this, at David Pakman Show. Check that out. Follow the David Pakman Show on Instagram. And while you're there, follow me on Instagram at david.pakman as well. If you love learning new things, you probably want to check this out. The David Pakman Show today is sponsored by Skillshare, and we're giving you 2 entire months of free access to Skillshare when you click the link underneath this video. Skillshare is a vibrant online learning community offering more than 25,000 video classes on just about anything you can think of. Get better at playing an instrument. Learn to use Photoshop. How to edit videos. They have classes on drawing, painting, business, cooking, nutrition, personal productivity, and I'm not even really scratching the surface. I recently took a great class on introductory watercolor painting. I'm still not good, but I am learning, and you can access the entire library of fun, easy to use online courses for free for 2 months by using the link underneath this video. 2 months of learning something that's totally new to you, something you want to get better at, something you already love, or you can get ahead in your career by learning new skills that will help you at your job. I've gotten a ton out of it. Pat has taken some courses that he's found really valuable, and I think you'll love it too. Get started for free by clicking the link under this video.